Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes, and today we are going to be diving into a deep discussion on the Immigrant Detention Bill that the US Congress has passed in the first legislative win for Donald Trump. The House of Representatives has passed the Laken-Riley Act, marking a significant legislative victory for President Donald Trump. The bill, which mandates the detention of undocumented migrants charged with specific crimes, received bipartisan support with a vote of 263 to 156. Notably, 46 Democrats joined Republicans in backing the measure. The legislation requires the Department of Homeland Security to detain undocumented individuals charged with offences like theft and burglary. It aims to address concerns over illegal immigration, especially following the tragic murder of college student Laken-Riley by an undocumented immigrant. In a related move, the US military will deploy an additional 1,500 troops to the Mexico border as part of Trump's immigration strategy. This follows his executive order to enhance border security and manage deportations. Joining us for this debate, we have Raymond Vickery, who is a former US Assistant Secretary of Commerce, joining us from Washington. We also have Ross Feingold, who's a political risk analyst in Taiwan. We have Don Ritter, who used to be the chair, or is the chairman, my apologies, of Remembrance Society in Washington. And finally, we have Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, who's a former diplomat. Firstly, I would like to come to you, please, Don Ritter. We're looking here at Trump, again, backing up comments that he's made. They have now passed through. What is going to stop Trump in his goal of deporting millions of people and stopping anyone getting through the southern border?
What is going to stop? Do I understand? What is going to stop Trump, did you say?
Yes. It seems that everything Trump's doing, he's delivering on. Unlike in his first term, he said he's going to build a wall. The wall was never built. But we're now looking at him making a claim. He's backed it up with an executive order, and it's now been passed. So do you think that this is the path that we're going to follow, and Trump's path towards a lack of immigration into the States?
Just a word previous. I'm a 14-year veteran of the United States Congress, and I'm presently chairman of the Remembrance Society, just so people have context. Yeah, it was it was probably the most definitive issue in the presidential campaign. It was an open border, and the migration probably put in between 8 and 14 million people in the last 4 years who were undocumented, including mostly young men seeking employment, but hundreds of thousands of criminals. Jails were emptied, mental institutions were emptied in countries like Venezuela. So this is a first step, and Laken-Riley was a symbol of this mass migration that brought with it many criminals, and that these same criminals are committing crimes today. So before you can deport, you have to detain. In order to detain, it's not just ICE or the immigration control, but it's also local officials. And these local officials are, local police forces and local government officials who, under the letter of the law in the United States, have to conform to this overarching federal immigration law. So that's one major issue. The other major issue is how to detain these people and where to detain them, and that is going to be a significant issue. How many beds are available? Not that many. And then once you detain them, you have the expense of deporting them, and all of those involve costs which are not presently in the legislation, but Congress will have to appropriate funds for that.
Yes, and building off your point there, Don Ritter, Raymond Vickery, I'd like to come to you. Where does the money come from to pay for all of this?
Indeed.
Could you repeat that?
Of course. Raymond Vickery, where does the money come from to pay for all of this expense that will come from Donald Trump's plan to deport, as he said, millions and millions of aliens?
Well, thanks very much for having me again. I think it's a very good question. Under the U.S. Constitution, the Congress is supposed to control the purse strings of the government. But under Trump, he believes evidently that he is the one that controls the purse strings and is able to divert funds from the military, which I believe will hurt their readiness, and get it wherever he wants, and not spend where he wants. To me, this is unconstitutional. But that's where he's headed in terms of getting the money. There are grave legal problems in terms of using money which has been appropriated for our military for defense purposes. For these, there are very explicit laws against the use of the military domestically in the United States. So it remains to be seen whether or not this extraordinary and, in my view, unconstitutional, illegal diversion of funds will hold, but it's going to be up to the courts. I would point out that this business that there is a flood of criminals, insane people. Trump referenced immigrants eating dogs and cats, pets of people during the campaign. This is all part of the big lie. That's just not the situation. We do have a problem in terms of immigration, particularly on the southern border, but reasonable people, both conservative and liberal, had come together under the leadership of Oklahoma Senator Langford to be able to address this problem in a logical and reasonable way. And Trump torpedoed that for political purposes because he didn't really want the resolution of the problem. What he wanted to do was to have power and get elected. And unfortunately, it's worked. I think in regard to U.S.-India relations, this is a grave matter in terms of immigration. There are whole industries in India dependent upon being able to move people back and forth across borders. Now, some of those people will overstay their visas from time to time. There are complicated legal requirements in terms of even temporary residency in the United States. So what is going to happen if you have this sort of massive sweep of 10 to 11 million people? The fact is that there's going to be an impact far beyond the question of resolving the illegal immigration problem. This goes to the whole question of birthright citizenship, which has been discussed, separation of families in terms of being able to do this. So it's a very, very, very serious problem. And ultimately, the United States courts, the Supreme Court of the United States, is going to be the decider. But that's not going to come quickly, whether or not in the final analysis in a year or two, the Supreme Court provides some check, both in terms of what you've indicated, appropriation of funds, but these measures to revoke asylum, which was put in after World War II because we turned away so many Jews who had been trying to seek asylum in the United States, Whether or not the court will step in a timely fashion is yet to be seen. There are signs both ways, but a majority of the court, including those appointees of Donald Trump, are in control of the Supreme Court, where, in my judgment, it's finally going to end up.
Yes, Ross Feingold, I want to look at the Laken-Riley Act, which has passed. 46 Democrats sided with the Republicans. Do you think this is support for the act or support for Trump, or maybe a bit of both?
It's probably a bit of both, but more than anything, it's a reflection of public opinion or popular opinion in the United States. Undocumented foreigners who have committed crimes, excuse me, are simply not a sympathetic constituency. They're not going to get sympathy from politicians, and it's clear they no longer have the sympathy of a majority of Americans. And I think I could say that based on what the vote was last November. Trump won a majority of the votes. He did so with very clear policy suggestions with regard to undocumented foreigners. So when it comes to undocumented foreigners who've committed crimes, it's something Republicans feel like that's it, you're out of here. And a number of Democrats, as you indicated, have come on board. And I think, again, that just reflects the public opinion in the United States at the moment. There's simply no sympathy for undocumented foreigners who, for example, commit shoplifting crimes, burglary, or assault a police officer.
Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, thank you for waiting while we spoke with the other guests there. I want to look at the troop movement that we know has now been started. 1,500 troops are going to the southern border. There are reports that this potentially could rise to 10,000. What is the impact of that level of troop mobilisation on something like stopping immigration?
So thank you very much. I guess that, when a situation is quite serious, as it happens to be currently on the border and on immigration, the governments and the administrations have to take steps which are necessary in the national interests, in the interests of the people, in the interests of the citizens. Now, if I try to look at it in a slightly granular fashion, if you have had a few million immigrants illegally pouring across the border into the US, what are the implications and what is the impact in terms of the short term, the medium term, the long term? Amongst those immigrants, since they have come in an undocumented fashion, the system, the administration, the Homeland Security, they wouldn't know the background of those people in any great amount of clarity. So whether you have jihadis who have come in, or Islamists, or even Chinese who may have dubious interests, because the number of Chinese who have come in is very, very large. So if you analyze the populations of immigrants, I think there has been an over focus on the Hispanic immigrants, whereas the more serious sort of cases would be those amongst the Hispanics or Chinese or the Islamists who are indulging, for example, or who have been part of the drug trade or the human trafficking trade or the sex trade, and plus terrorism. So if I have to look at the situation as an administrator or as a person who has the interest of United States at heart, then I think that all these areas are of grave concern, and it's good that now the troops are being moved to the border. If they can buttress the troops which are already there and help the immigration officials and the border police and the customs people at the border to control that flow of immigrants, which was happening in a rampant fashion, I must say. And on the northern border also with Canada, you have, for example, in British Columbia, there are a lot of people whose interests are not aligned with those of America or Canada, who have come from China. Now, one of the panelists did mention about the Indian immigrants also. I'm sure a lot of Indian immigrants will also suffer if they come in an undocumented fashion. They should not be coming in undocumented. Because what I see here is that the Indian diaspora has been contributing very, very positively to the United Nations, particularly the ones who are, in staying here on a legal basis with documents. And a lot of congressmen and senators who I speak to, they mention that besides, contributing the maximum amount per capita to taxes, besides being the highest per capita ethnic group which has the highest income, besides having family values, besides creating so many jobs in the US, Indians in jails and Hindus in jails in the US particularly are an absolutely statistically insignificant minority in the sense that you could probably count the numbers of Hindus in jails in the US on your fingertips. So they feel very proud because the education also per capita basis is the highest amongst the Indians. So if Indian immigrants are coming in undocumented, I guess they will now be sort of, they will have second thoughts. They will not be so enthusiastic about coming in because once you start sending back immigrants, India has also, as a first country, I think, agreed to take back some of the undocumented immigrants. But the other aspect, if I talk about the logistical aspect now, if you have a few millions, I don't know how many millions are there, and you have to start deporting them, it's going to be quite an exercise because we have had to airlift in India, for example, when I was a diplomat working for India, just a few 100,000 or even a few small number of, a couple of million people to get them out of zones which are hazardous, where wars are going on, where Indian lives are imperiled, is a absolutely mammoth task. We have also helped many other countries evacuating their nationals, including those from France and Germany and so many other countries, because we have those capacities and we have built up those capacities. But all the same, it's a task which requires a lot of cooperation from the other nations, a lot of negotiations, a lot of discussions. But what it will also do is to dissuade the new arrivals from coming in. The other aspect, which is very important for all of us here in America to understand, is the impact that will have on the demography here and on the voting patterns. There are some benefits of having positive, people who are positively, who have a positive outlook towards the US because they add to the labor, they add to the strengths of the country.
Sorry to interrupt, Ambassador. I just want to pick up on your point there of labour, and I think it's an important one for us to make. Raymond Vickery, the migrants that are in the United States aren't all criminals. There are many millions that are there working, and there's potential for up to 5% of the American workforce to be deported if Trump has his wish and deports all of the migrants that he wants to. What do you think that impact could be, not just on communities, but also the country's economy as a whole?
Well, it's going to have a very harmful impact. The fact is that it is immigrants, many of whom are not properly documented, but are nevertheless very solid producers here, have their own families and so forth. And they're doing the work. They're out there on the construction sites. They're building roads. They're taking care of landscaping. They're providing home care services. All of these things are happening because even as Trump has indicated, we need the people for our very growing economy. The problem is not that Trump is willing to deal with immigration. The problem is how you do it, and whether you do it in a reasonable and a humane way in accordance with the values which we have expressed in the United States for centuries, or whether or not you just say, look, we're going to send in the military, we're going to round up 10 to 11 million people and we're going to ship them out of here, which is exactly what Trump has said. And people in the past have said, well, don't take them literally, just listen to the substance of it. Well, the fact is the literal and the substance are coming together right now as we speak in terms of doing this. And for those who think that Indian Americans won't really be impacted by this, or that Indians won't be impacted because they're good and solid citizens, and it'll just be those other guys, which are bad guys, I think that's a sadly mistaken approach to it. What's going to happen is there's going to be disruption across the economy, and many people who may not have dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's will be swept up in it, along with the disruption to families and the economy. So that's the problem. We've talked about this act which has gone through. Nobody disputes that criminals who are not documented ought to be deported. That's already a part of U.S. law. What this new law does is extend that to say not only people who've been convicted of something, but anybody who's been accused of something, even like shoplifting can go, is going to have to be deported immediately. And the bipartisan vote on this shows that there is a willingness to try to deal in a reasonable way with problems such as.
We have Mr. Vickery, you've taken a lot of time, and there's only 3 minutes left to this discussion. And I want to point out something very important that's been missed. The open borders political machinations within the United States are not exactly salutary to the future of this country's political distribution. Now, millions of people have come in a very short period of time, and Mr. Vickery is arguing for at the margins what's happened. In addition to vast criminality in this country, and not just shoplifting, but the massive criminality that this has come with this wave, and it's not immigration, okay? It's migration, and it's migration from countries that don't really enjoy a positive relationship with the people of the United States. But the Democratic Party in the Biden years has been taken over by an open border progressive influence. And, you know, Mr. Vickery is a solid liberal Democrat. I don't believe he is of this progressive ilk, but that's what's happened in this country. And when you have hundreds of thousands, millions of people in the United States, and they move into certain areas of the United States, the congressional apportionment of congressional districts is impacted not by census, not by citizenship, but by census. And you can create dozens of new congressional districts. That was the whole idea.
Well, let's look at some of those hotspots then. If we're looking at places like San Diego, we're looking close to the southern border and other metropolitan hubs. Ross Feingold, there could be large proportions of these cities and these districts which are decimated in terms of the running of these places. How do you think that could impact some of these hotspots? And also a separate point, but one I want to join onto it, you've got immigrants who are undocumented that have had children who were born in the States. How do you mix all of that together and come up with a solution that appeases the masses?
Certainly the flow of undocumented foreigners into certain areas of the United States has put an enormous strain on the ability of local governments to deliver public services that they're responsible for delivering to the local population. Things like hospital space in public schools are under great pressure. The medical care systems in these communities is also under great pressure because of large numbers of undocumented immigrants. And this has been discussed in great detail. And again, I think it led into the backlash that we saw by voters last November, putting into power, not just in the White House, but in both houses of Congress, the tough on immigrant Republicans. So I think the public has spoken for now. They've made their views very clear. When it comes to the large numbers of people who are really taking over certain communities, then the public is extremely frustrated with that. And local leaders have to respond to that. And that's why we even see the mayor of New York City in recent days meeting with President Trump, a Democrat that people thought would never meet with President Trump, but he's already meeting with President Trump to try and find a solution. So the public is really demanding solutions, and they want one soon, not later.
Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, we are looking, of course, at an issue that is divisive, but it seems that the majority are in support of this. Do you think that people within Trump's strongest support, in terms of MAGA supporters, will be frustrated if the action doesn't go far enough, considering their views on immigration?
Well, that is going to be a difficult act to implement at a rapid pace, which will match their expectations or their hopes. So it is going to create some difficulties. It's going to create some illusionment or disillusionment. But as long as the supporters of Trump and the MAGA supporters and the other Republican supporters of Trump and the other Democrats who are now supporting these policies see that some positive action is being taken, over time they'll understand that it's not that you wave a magic wand and the situation gets solved overnight. It is going to impact, like one of the other panelists was mentioning, the demographic patterns, because in other countries also, like in India, we've seen that huge waves of immigrants from Bangladesh, for example, the Muslim immigrants. They have been impacting the voting patterns very significantly. So here also it's bound to happen over time. If these people continue to live in the United States and then get their documentation done over time and start becoming voters. So I guess it's something which the US has to understand, that it's a difficult position that it is in, but it has to find solutions and it has to work on those solutions at a good pace. Thank you.
Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much, Don Ritter. Thank you, Ross Feingold. And also thank you to Raymond Vickery. As Trump assembles his top team, works towards his goals, he's looking to make impacts across immigration and other policies. And we will, of course, bring you all of the latest on those throughout his tenure.